All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Mental Wellness Week, session number 3. And today is the physical trainer's perspective. You've seen Emma Hicks' bio and information online. You will know that she has extensive training and experience in the field of physical training. And you will also notice that her most recent assignment, I would say, is that she has joined the coaching staff, and I want to make sure I get this right, of the Canadian National Women's Tackle Football Team 2021, correct? All right, so please welcome Emma Hicks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me today. I was really excited when Alan asked me to come and share with you. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. And I want to share a little bit about my story and experience, and then tie in a little bit of research on mental health and wellness and exercise and how that all fits together. Because there's some really cool things on the science side of it as well. We won't go into it too much, but just some evidence around it. So I grew up in Sussex. I graduated from the Christian school just down the road. And then I went to Houghton College in upstate New York, if any of you guys have heard of that place. I spent my first 2 years there in biology, and then I transferred to UNB in Fredericton and finished my degree in kinesiology. From there, I went and did certification to become a strength and conditioning specialist, and went back to school as well for a postgrad cert at Massey University in sport and exercise science. So kind of kept learning. That's one of the things that still love to do, continue to learn along the way. But sport and exercise for me was always like more of a social thing, I think. It gave me a little bit of a group that I could be a part of. I was never the star athlete, but I worked hard and I just enjoyed working with a group and with a team. And I think one of the biggest things when it comes to thinking about exercise, no matter what that looks like for you, is finding something that you really do enjoy. It's not that every time when you go to train or go, then you love it. There's some days that you don't, but you know that it's good for you, so it's good to do. But you shouldn't dread it all the time. If you don't like running, don't choose running. Right? Find things that you actually enjoy. Maybe you like to swim. Maybe you and sometimes you don't know what you like until you try a variety of things. So it's awesome when we're growing up to be able to be exposed to different things and find what we like, but sometimes we don't have that opportunity until we're older. When I was 22, I actually kind of stumbled into football, and I hated the sport even to watch it on TV because I thought it was silly, because they would do something for about 5 seconds and then they have about a minute break. I was like, how do you follow that? Let's have something a little more exciting. So I didn't even like to watch it on TV, but I moved to Regina, Saskatchewan, and they were just starting their women's team. If anybody's from Saskatchewan or been there, a couple people. So the Rough Riders is Saskatchewan, football is Saskatchewan. So when I moved there, they were just starting their women's team, and I was like, I'll give it a try, because I was just looking for something else to do. Turned out that I was actually really good at it, and I ended up playing with the national team in 2013. So I am excited to be back coming up as a coach as well. But some of the things that sport did for me was on the mental side. So actually, I'll skip back a little bit, because in between some of that schooling, I also spent some time in the Czech Republic, in Brno with Global Partners. And it was actually when I was over there that I started to have a little bit of I started to realize some things about my own mental health and maybe a little bit of depression, which then I actually learned that it also runs in my family, which I wasn't aware of, because it wasn't really something that my parents talked to me about growing up, and until I started to talk about it, and they're like, oh yeah, there's a history of that. Oh, that's good to know. And so when I came back, then I actually made an appointment, saw my doctor, because the people that I was working with, we had some conversations and felt like that was probably a really good thing. So when I met with my doctor, then we talked about it and talked about primarily looking at nutrition and exercise as the first step to help with that, because both of those things together really can make a really, really big difference for our mental health. And I was fortunate that was able to help me, and I'm still very aware of it. And I know that when I'm not training or when I'm not eating properly, then that's something that I do fall into, and I always try to be aware of that. Thankfully, I have really great support where I'm at right now with work as well, so my colleagues will make sure like they bring me food and stuff if I don't. But that's a little bit of my experience with that. And then also when I stopped playing sports, so I stopped because I had concussions, which is pretty serious. And they can replace a lot of things, but they can't replace brains. So at one point I decided that was enough for my sporting career. I shouldn't play contact sport anymore. And so also stepping back from that was a big change. When we go through life changes, that can have a lot of stress and changes our routines, changes a lot that goes on in our mind. And so when I stepped back from that, then I was like, okay, so now what am I doing? Who am I? What kind of, like, I always identified as an athlete, like that's what people knew me for. And I trained for my sport, and now I didn't have a sport, so then I'm like, well, what am I training for? And then when I'm not training, then my nutrition also goes not as good, and all of it kind of just snowballs one way or the other. So it can go positive or negative, and thinking about the decisions that we make along the way. So for me, one of the biggest things was just to become more self-aware about how I'm thinking and what choices I'm making that are impacting that. Because the science and the evidence on nutrition and exercise being really good really can be really positive. That is very clear. And so when we can make decisions to own that and make positive decisions for ourselves, that makes a big difference when we understand that we can have an impact on that. So actually, I also sought out a psychologist as I was kind of working through this as well. So I've seen a psychologist a couple times just to help with organizing the thoughts in my brain. So sometimes it's not because I'm in a really depressive state. It's just I'm extremely overwhelmed with all kinds of things, and then I stop eating and I stop training and I just work, and I don't know how to manage the rest of my life. So I just have taken the opportunity to do that and to reach out to somebody who can help me just organize my thoughts and put priorities and make sure that if family is one of my top priorities, but yet all of my time is being spent with work, that doesn't make sense, and it doesn't reach the goal, and it doesn't help me have a fulfilled life, and it doesn't help my mental health, because it's just a snowballing effect. So I think it's important to always not feel like we can't ask for help, and not to feel like you need to be in a really bad place to ask for help. Asking for help earlier on helps so much more. So a little bit on, I just want to look quickly at 3 studies. One of them looked at adult brains. The average was 30-year-olds. I'm about 30. Any others? A little older, a little younger? Shelly's about 30. So they looked at 1,200 brains on an MRI scan. And so usually MRI studies, they have about a pool of about 30, and they're like, oh, that's a really good sample size. But for this one, they had 1,200 people volunteer to have their brains scanned. And then they also did memory and like decision-making and a whole bunch of skills with like brain function. So they looked at the structure of their brains, and they looked at the function of how well they can perform with learning things, remembering things, all that type of stuff. And they found that that fitness was directly correlated to better brain function and brain structure, even in young adults. So they've known for a long time that like as we age, that's really important, and exercise can have a really big impact down the road when we get older, and dementia and other types of conditions start to come around. But even in younger populations, then they're seeing more and more evidence that exercise and fitness levels also make a difference, even for the young ones. And that's younger than the 30-year-olds as well, all the way down. So that was some really cool evidence that they found on that. I apologize, my notes are super small, how I printed them out, so I'm trying to read. And then, so the second one was about exercise and specifically for mental health treatment. So the first one, just looking at like our brain function and how it is, and that exercise has a really positive effect there. The second one looked at exercise and mental health treatment. So specifically, like even anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, suicidal tendencies, like more serious and diagnosed mental health conditions. So there's evidence too that exercise should be the first form of treatment before they go to drugs. And so that study that came out was like highly recommended it and was pretty well respected. I don't know if it will change how things are treated, but there is significant evidence that even with those more severe and more serious conditions or further along the way, that exercise can really have a significant impact with that as well. And then the third one was just on movement and pain and joint health. So that's also a big thing that I've had to deal with. I don't think I mentioned. Through all of this, I've had about 15 years of chronic pain. I had back injury that started when I was 15 years old and then kind of up and down the whole way for the rest. And if you have ever lived with chronic pain or know somebody who has, then it has a significant impact. It takes so much energy away from people. It adds so much stress to everything else that they have to do in their life when you have pain all the time. But again, one of the best things that you can do when you have pain is to move in a smart way with medical or chiropractor, physio, some sort of supervision if needed. But one of the best things that you can do, even in pain, is to move. And when I had surgery, I had a spinal fusion surgery 2 years ago. And through my rehab, I was very diligent. There were a lot of days that I didn't want to do it. I would spend like 2 hours at the gym down here, and then I'd go home and watch a movie and spend 2 hours sitting on the floor doing more mobility stuff. But it's about finding ways so first of all, finding something that you like to do or that you just don't hate, because sometimes you don't love it all the time. But also finding ways sometimes to just work it into your day. So it doesn't need to be, I need to commit an hour every day. It can be 5 minutes here and there. Or it could be half an hour 3 times a week. And you could even start real small, right? So it's about creating habits and building on that. So remembering that we can make those decisions to better our mental health. And exercise is one of it can sound really hard, but it's also usually pretty free. So it doesn't cost much. You can be creative in what you find and how you do things, and knowing that that can have a significant impact, and that you have control over that. And there are days that maybe you don't want to, but and sometimes being okay with not doing it, I think, is important as well, but really prioritizing it. And for me, coming back from injury, I was off work for 8 months, and then coming back to work, then I had to prioritize exercise, because when I let it go, that's when either my mental health and or my physical health and pain come back. So sometimes being strict about some priorities on that, because you know that it's going to help you long term, is really important.